This is the Sacred Knowing of Is video series, interview number 17 with Tisziji Muñoz. I had some questions for you covering chapters 128 through 136. From chapter 128, you write, "What is natural to some is unnatural to others. And this is particularly so in regards to human desire, passion, lust, and vanity. In this area of civilized practice, the human as a society fails and falls lower into its own self-destruction. Here, humans forget their station in the kingdoms of nature and allow the animal nature, which speaks through their intelligence for its own appeasement and indulgence only. My question is, why is it so difficult for a lot of people to practice not giving into their animal nature?"
One reason is because it's part of the pleasure function. And we're talking about animal pleasures which are sacred. It's all sacred in a manner of speaking. The pluses, the minuses, the positive, the negative experiences are all part of the steps that are necessary to take on the path of self-mastery. And firstly, it's important to realize that we're talking about relative states of consciousness in every case, and people are, really complex beings with multi-dimensional capabilities. So they're physical bodies, and within their physical bodies they have astral bodies, feeling bodies, and within that they have causal bodies, memory bodies, and within that they have lower mental bodies, and within that they have higher mental bodies, and within that they have creative mental bodies, and within that they have spiritual bodies, and so on and so forth. So we are very complex, and it's not a simple thing to analyze in terms of what works for certain peeps and where their desires may be in one place at one day or one time. So we're talking about machinery that is pretty much somewhat conscious but mostly unconscious. And that is really the truth of it. A lot of it's unconscious, and people need to train to become more conscious of their machinery, their programs, their inheritances, their ancestral influences, so that they can determine for themselves what to taper back relative to their desires that are helping them experience their human nature, in terms of all of its richness and beauty, and then what beyond the point for certain individuals is the same kind of desire, but at a different time and different circumstance in their life where they start to see it differently. They start to see, and this can happen to anyone. First you like it, and then you're not sure you like it, and you're wondering why you like it, and then you go beyond that and say you don't like it, and then you want to get beyond that. So that's also human nature from a creative transformational viewpoint. That's to get beyond everything, to let everything go. Because we also have a spiritual nature which is not related to the physical nature exactly in the same way that the body and the mind are related by culture to, let's say, the phenomena, the subtle phenomena and the gross phenomena of, let's say, the operation of the human body. So it really depends on a number of factors. So we can say simply, everyone's different. And everyone is, got to do what they have to do. But when we're talking about spiritual practice, then it's a matter of understanding. You may not be yet at this time doing what you are really here to do, and so you have to figure out how to get to that place. And that takes some experiencing. Sometimes that takes a lot of pain and suffering before a person can go beyond their desire to have bondage into, let's say, the domain of possibility of desiring liberation. So this is also part of the awakening process, and for some it happens in the beginning when you're having just basic animal desires, and they can wake up because it's time for them to wake up. And so it can happen at any point. And you can also automatically transcend certain levels of programs so that you can experience certain things as a child, as many do, see, of the spiritual, and then come back to the material and have that as a reference point for later on in your life. That might be a glimpse of the future for you.
You mentioned ancestral influences. Is that the primary influence that would cause someone to want to indulge in certain desires, or is there other influence as well? Or?
Well, you have to consider your nature, your basic, let's say, family nature, your culturing. And you have to work from that. All of that is good. It brings you to the table of life, it brings you to the toilet of life, it brings you to everything in life. It brings you to the altar of life. And so we need to respect, how we get to where we are. But not necessarily to the degree where you succumb to it. So it's really a matter of understanding the ancestral influences give you some momentum up to a point. They more or less certify your presence in a particular karmic situation. The conditions you wind up in at any point in your life, they're given. They're not necessarily always self-created, but they are given, they're inherited, and there you are. And then you have to decide what to do at that juncture of time and space. And that would determine to what degree you are able to go forward and not just into your so-called karmic future in the way that you were before, extending the way you were into whatever it is, that is your time coming. But maybe at that point considering, well, the way you were is not good enough. So now you need to change the way you were into the way you need to be. So then that plays heavily on how are you willing to be now in order to change the way you were into the way you need to be to create a result in your future that is really a positive one for yourself. See? So you're taking the ancestral influences, which you are, ancestral influence, but you are also the higher potential of that. So you also have the ability to see that these ancestral influences that you were given are a starting point for you and not the end point. And now you know what else you can do. And this is also part of our ancestral inheritance, having the wisdom to do better and know better at the same time.
If one is surrounded by low spirit influences due to living or workplace circumstances, where or how can one draw strength and inspiration to practice detachment from these influences and create more balance?
Well, you have to have, firstly, a sense of being other than negative influences. That's the first perception you need, that you are not just that, but that you are subject to these things which are more transitory. In your case, you see them coming and going. And that you by nature, if you know your nature, if you're a person of a peaceful disposition, and you will be sensitive to negative energies more so than other people will be who feed off of negative energies, because negative energy is very good energy for people, so, and they need it for strength and stimulation and action. See? So it has a dynamic quality to it, but to be taken by it to a place that you really don't want to be, that you don't need to be, swept away, that is, by negative energy, which is very, very stimulating, that can be an issue that you have to correct for yourself, and you have to make certain perceptions and decisions and come to certain conclusions about who your influences need to be, in the sense that you want to go with very specific influences, and then you, from past experience, recognize certain other influences. You say, I don't want to go that way because the results, I can already see the results, it's not going to be particularly good for me. It might be good for everybody else, but in this case, you're talking about the individual, and the individual has to be sensitive enough to see that they have to let certain things go in the process of their perception of what it is, sensing and say, this is good for them, but this time it's not something I need to do. So you're depending then on a higher judgment and a better, safer place for yourself to be. And so you go about your way, detaching yourself accordingly.
Would it be wise for one who recognizes that they are in a low spirit environment to remove themselves from such a situation, even if leaving could at least on the surface initially be seen as negative or perhaps even harmful? For example, such in the case of a parent feeling that they have to leave their children?
Well, sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes you have to leave everything. Depends on your karma, your conditions, your prior agreement with certain conditions. So even though people seem to be unconscious of things that happen to them, if they stop and had a deeper moment of introspection in terms of what they have been doing, what they've been saying, and how they have been actually creating their own life pattern to that moment, they might be able to feel differently about things. They may not be leaving anything. They may just be proceeding on their path, appearing to let go of things. See? So the process of letting go is not lopsided. See, there's a time when things end and they fall away. And sometimes that appears to be, well, some people are abandoning their station, but there may not be anything holding them psychically. And so they're relieved of it. But on the surface, these people would be judged as being irresponsible. But they may not be. So we need less of a superficial view of the karmic situation of certain peeps and more of a psychic and deeper spiritual understanding of what's going on. So, in other words, to see a bigger picture as it pertains to certain situations. Okay.
From chapter 128, you write, "Those who do not learn lessons of detached love must reincarnate or recommit to do so in order to eventually move and operate as leaders of the race or even as messengers of the spirit." My question is detached love a difficult lesson to be learned, practiced, and mastered for most beings here on earth? And if so, why?
Well, because of our nature to be attached, especially consistent with the way we were raised, with parents who are loving. If you were fortunate enough to have that kind of karma, or siblings who are also loving and supportive, if you are fortunate enough to have that, or just having good people in your, let's say, early life experience that encourage you to be basically, a good person, and so a content person, and one who's okay with themselves. So all of these influences are part of the process. And then we have to start learning to outgrow certain influences, and it really depends on the individual's makeup, which determines to what degree they are conscious of what they need to let go of in order to move to a higher level of, say heart awareness or heart consciousness, or getting more into the spiritual dimension of life. Sometimes it happens spontaneously, sometimes it happens methodically, sometimes it happens coincidentally with other things happening, sometimes it happens as a result of very, very intense stress, which is what's necessary in some cases to wake a person up to what their real next step ought to be for themselves.
Also from chapter 128, you write, "Each spirit soul must, as they will, be tried and tested by lust and sensuality as by karmas of brutality and intellectuality. Whereas progression is only possible when, at each level, love purifies the consciousness of attachment at that level, detaching the spirit soul from the existing attachment, preparing or opening it for the higher awareness, transcendence, wisdom, and free being." Is it impossible for some people to properly recognize and or be open to receiving the kind of love you're referring to?
Yes, it's a long ways off from coming anytime soon for many people. And so I think the good news is that people may eventually come upon the need to enter a spiritual dimension of love and kindness and sweetness and compassion. Many people are much younger than that and less mature and less experienced, less tested, less broken. And so they need to learn a certain way called the path of hard knocks. They need to be banged up a little bit. They need to be tenderized, so to speak, by heavy blows. And thus we see that happening all around us as part of a form of spiritual intelligence or karmic intelligence, that is to say, natural intelligence that is not really outside of the field of justice. It is a form of justice, of balancement according to the makeup of the individual, and we can't see that. So we say, well, why did that child have to go? Why did this person have to go? They seem to be so perfectly good and so, happy, and so, but we don't see what's going on. See, so we cannot see the processes. We can't see the mechanisms at play. See, we're not able to see that. So we judge it out of our reaction to what's happening, and often out of our ignorance, because we really don't know. See? And this happens to parents who have children that are taken from them. They just cannot, for the life of them, bring themselves to accept such an act or these kinds of situations. And we can't blame them, because it's such profoundly painful, and heartbreak is just unbearable, and everybody around them feels it. And these people are not ready to experience that kind of separation, detachment, or release, and loss. They just can't handle it. And sometimes people evolve through that, and they start to see that, well, the loss then, for evolving people, say it's a game. See? They learn a lot from it. See? So then gain comes from loss, and losses lead to gains. They're really two sides of the same coin of experience. But we don't learn that too easily. It takes time. Then you start to see the pattern. Then when certain changes show up, you move with them gracefully. You could say, yeah, no, this is the order of things, and you can't fight it. It's hard to enjoy, but you know it's lawful, so you endure it with a higher sense of dignity and self-respect and grace. So even if it's terribly painful, so nothing we can do about it. This is it. This is the challenge right here. It's upon us. See, we have to weather this storm now. We have to survive this. We can't be done in by this, because it's too easy for some people to be done in. Some people want to be done in by it, because there are those that say, no, I can't go on without this person. I refuse to live now. Whether it's a pet or not. I've seen it. I know it very well.
From chapter 129, you write, marriage is simply a concept name for an acknowledged relationship or relational arrangement of commitment between two or more beings who have karma, not love to work out. Love exists outside of the contractive confines of cultic or emotionally conflictive and attached relationships in general. Can a marriage or a romantic relationship in general be a result of ancestral or spiritual influences? And if so, in such a case, are the beings in such a relationship working off their own karmic debt, or are they working off the karmic debt of their ancestors?
Well, from a classroom viewpoint, which is where we are now in the classroom, it's hard to say exactly. But one thing is for sure, there is a certain kind of phenomenon, yes, that occurs, which could be called love. And the people say they don't know why they're together. They just are together, and they just enjoy being together. And it's a form of love. But they don't necessarily have to feel that they're in love with the other person. It's just so right. It's like magic or strange or alien or not supposed to be that way. They don't feel painful about it. So they feel spacious about it. So there's that kind of presence of love when it shows up, and it's beyond the ego. So it's not like most people say they're in love because they're attached and they're in pain about it, and they don't want to see the person go, or the situation, they don't want to see a change. So it's a very painful kind of arrangement, which is not really love. It's attachment, positive attachment that is too often mistaken for love of the nature I'm speaking about, which is something that's more free, liberated, and healing, and comes, and sometimes it disappears. So people can be struggling with a marriage for years, fighting back and forth, and all of a sudden the presence of love comes in out of nowhere, and they stop fighting, and they're just being together, and it's great. People see it and say there's perfect marriage here. See? And the people themselves may not know what's going on. That's the magic, the beauty, and the spiritual sense of what I'm talking about. That can come at any time. That could happen when you're a teenager and bring you into a relationship with somebody. You don't even know what's going on. You're just one with the person for the time being. You can't figure anything out because it's beyond you. See, so love is a part of, they say, the spiritual componentry that can show up, it can stay, it's always accessible, but it's mysterious in nature because it serves a purpose, it has an intelligence to it. But we don't see that because we're so self-absorbed. We don't see when it comes, how it comes, and why it comes. Amazing mystery. You say, wow, I was so in love with that person, or it may have been the true love like that, where it's perfect. And then all of a sudden it leaves because life is not about that exactly. Okay? It's not about love that transcends your necessary experience and your training out here. See? So it has to come and it has to go. But we sure love the idea of knowing it's there, and we wish it could stay all the time with us, but I'm not sure we deserve to have it.